The truth is, some Americans think this country is messed up and they dream of escaping to or retiring to Canada. Well, today we're talking to someone who's an absolute expert on the Canadian housing market. But before we get to that, I'm talking to people across North America about their home buying experience. It's for research. So if you want to participate in that, click the link below and schedule a time to talk. So today I have Steve Saretsky, who is a Vancouver realtor, and he has an incredible understanding of the macroeconomic outlook and how it affects the housing market. And he has a YouTube channel that you simply must subscribe to. Welcome, Steve.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me on.
So for anyone thinking of escaping to or retiring to Canada, what's the Canadian housing market like right now?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot crazier than what I see, at least in the US. We're kind of notoriously known for very high valuations. Obviously, I live in Vancouver, which I think is ranked second on a global level in terms of property prices. I live in one of the most expensive property markets in the world. I think right now we're seeing crazy price acceleration. I mean, sounds like very similar to what you guys are experiencing in the US, but we're growing from a very high level because if you look at our property market on a national level, we actually never really had much of a correction in 2008. We dropped off maybe 10% for about 6 months, and then we were back to the races and moving higher. So we are coming off very high valuations and we're continuing to move higher. So there's just so much political discussion on housing affordability and a lot of political backlash, a lot of government intervention trying to slow the market, but really nothing seems to be working.
You mentioned that you guys didn't have much of a downturn after 2008, which kind of fascinates me because I remember after we had ours in the US, everyone was like, oh, Canada, when are the prices going to drop? When are they going to drop? And maybe they did a little, but not much. How do you explain that? Why is that?
Yeah, we basically, our policymakers were quick to intervene, and we actually just doubled down. So you guys in the US had a debt deleveraging, where you had that huge buildup in household debt, and then obviously you had a wave of foreclosures, and people obviously, the debt ratios fell. In Canada, we actually just essentially like we did basically bail out our banks here. We doubled down on borrowing, so they basically mandated banks to keep lending, and so it kind of staved off a nasty correction.
How are the markets in your different cities right now, like Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, and Vancouver? How are they different, or are they all the same?
Yeah, it's a good question. So obviously Vancouver and Toronto is the two global cities. I'm trying to think of the US equivalents, but so Vancouver, everybody would probably consider similar to let's say San Francisco, and Toronto would be the sort of New York or Manhattan kind of thing. So those are two biggest property markets, most expensive. Those are the ones that really everybody talks about, because when we have immigration to Canada, the reality is most people that immigrate here, they actually end up going to those two cities. So that's really where you see most of the housing froth. And then if you talk about the other property markets, Alberta, so Calgary or Saskatchewan, which is kind of your oil denominated provinces, where you have it's similar, almost similar, I want to say, to Texas, where you have urban sprawl, you can build forever. Those property markets have been relatively flat-ish for the last sort of 10 years. So there hasn't been a whole lot of activity going on there, but they're now picking up as well. I think we're just seeing so much, so much bank lending right now in the Canadian housing market. So really all of these provinces across Canada are actually seeing an increase in house prices.
Are there other areas of Canada, smaller towns, where Americans like to retire or feel comfortable retiring, or even Canadians?
Obviously Vancouver is a popular destination. We got quite a few Americans here. We do have it all. I would say Vancouver is the best place if you are earning your income elsewhere. If you're earning an income in Vancouver and you're trying to buy property here, it's very, very difficult. But if you're a wealthier American, or someone wealthy from China or something, that's the best place to come, because it's obviously a great place to live. But So yeah, we tend to see a lot of Americans funnel into Vancouver, maybe a little bit of Vancouver Island, if you're retiring, sort of thing, slower pace. But yeah, it's gorgeous, and there's so many good things to do.
You guys have a wine region, right? And I can't remember the name. Is it Calgary, or am I
Yeah,
saying
it's
that right?
Kelowna.
Kelowna.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty popular too. That's probably like, yeah, it's like our wine region. Obviously, hotter summers. Big beautiful lakes, great wine. So that's kind of another popular tourist destination. Not so great in the winter because it gets pretty cold, but
Do you see a crash coming in the Canadian housing market? What would need to be present for that to happen?
I mean, I think the only way that you're going to get a crash realistically is like if you have significantly higher yields, right? So if you see mortgage rates today we borrow, like in Canada, you can borrow at like 1.7%. So I think like the only way you're going to have like a quote unquote crash is if those mortgage rates go from 1.7 to say 3.7. I think that would actually have a significant, and they would have to stay at 3.7, for a significant amount of time. I think then we would have a significant correction, but I just don't think that. I just think that the bond market is so heavily manipulated by central banks that we're already seeing a lot of central banks coming out and not implicitly doing yield curve control, but basically targeting yields and how much they're going to try to allow them to rise. So it's hard for me to see like a major drawdown. I think we'll have pullbacks because the market always ebbs and flows. But I look at the U.S., right? I mean, like part of the thing, like what I think is like sort of crashed your housing bubble back then was obviously the Federal Reserve was aggressively hiking interest rates, tightening monetary policy into the bust. And then you guys had the bust, right? But like here, there doesn't seem to be any willingness to tighten interest rates. The Bank of Canada has come out and said, "Oh, we're going to keep interest rates basically at zero until 2023, and we're going to do all this, quantitative easing, money printing to kind of keep the game going." So until I really see like the bond market get out of control and central banks lose control, I just don't see any meaningful longer term correction. But we'll see.
This fascinates me because it just seems like the housing markets are running so hot in North America. And how is it that they don't see this as a problem?
Yeah.
There's so many reports of buyers that, first-time buyers that just can't get in, and people are not, at least here in the US, because we've got the 30-year loans, people are not giving up their first home and they're buying a second home and using the first one as an investment because rates are so low. And that makes it even harder for the first-time buyers to get into the market. Yet nobody seems to see this as a problem. So I just wonder how long they're going to let this go on.
Yeah, I think it's a similar situation in in Canada. I think that the policymakers, like the Bank of Canada, has come out and said, like, listen, like house prices aren't in our mandate. So we target quote unquote a 2% inflation target, and we're watching the labor market, and that's what we care about. Like if house prices are going up 20%, like that's for the federal government to figure out. And if they want to intervene, like they can do it on their own accord. So nobody really wants to touch it. I think that they're looking at it and saying, well, house prices are up, this is creating like this wealth effect. And like you said, right, people are then leveraging that and borrowing more money to go buy another investment property, or, hey, the house is up, let's go do a home renovation. Let's go buy another car. Like that's kind of what's happening right now, obviously. So I think the policymakers, look at it and say, well, there's a lot of negative repercussions or side effects. Like obviously young buyers being priced out perhaps indefinitely. But the benefit of it is, hey, we're, a lot of people are richer and we're creating this wealth effect, and it will, don't worry, it will trickle down. And I think that, when I read between the lines, I think their view is that it will trickle down to these young buyers, and the fact that they'll be able to secure jobs because the economy is stronger. Whereas if we don't support the housing market, the labor market will be weak and these young people will be out of jobs. So I don't know. I certainly don't agree with a lot of their policies. I think that they are creating these wealth inequalities, but I don't really see any desire at this point to change these policies.
So you said something a little while back that's kind of stunning to me. You said that your interest rates were around 1.7%, which is so incredibly low. Now, I understand in Canada, your lending system is a little bit different. You have short-term loans that adjust. You don't have the 30-year fixed. Can you explain kind of your lending system to me? And can Americans even get loans in Canada?
Yeah, I think it's like the key risk in Canada, whereas like that's where I'd be like, I'm a little bit more optimistic on US real estate, just because I think like, hey, if you can lock in a rate for 30 years, it kind of hedges a lot of your downside risk. Like, so yeah, I think when you look at Canada, we have basically the most common mortgage here is it's a 5-year term. So we lock in your rate at 1.7%, for example, for 5 years. And in 5 years, you have to renew at the new rate. So whatever that new rate is, it was obviously depends on what the bond market is doing. So, heaven forbid, obviously, let's say inflation is way higher and bond yields are way up. And, you in 5 years, you might have to renew your mortgage at, not 1.7, but maybe 3%. And that would be obviously a significant problem. So far we've just had last 20 years of rates falling. So it's kind of worked out really well. Which is why I think policymakers are going to be in a very tough situation to try to maintain these low rates. There's obviously things that they can do if rates go to 3%. They could look at extending amortizations and stuff like that. But the longest term that we actually have in Canada, nobody really uses it because they just haven't felt the need to. We do have a 10-year mortgage, but you will pay quite a bit more for that. So instead of, let's say 1.7, you're probably closer to 2.5. So a lot of people just say, well, I'll just do the 5-year mortgage and worry about it later.
And so far that's worked out okay.
Yeah, so far it's worked out. And you were asking obviously about, Americans trying to get like loans in Canada. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, like I think that you have to get about, the banks usually want about 35% down for quote unquote like a foreign investor. The only thing that's becoming I guess problematic or something that for Americans to sort of consider is that in 2016, because our market was, being flooded by a lot of offshore money, particularly from China, is our government brought in a 20% foreign buyer tax. So if you're an American citizen and you don't work in Canada or you're not a Canadian permanent resident, you're just, American that wants to come here and buy a house to live in for 2 months, you have to pay a 20% tax on your purchase price.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's in Vancouver and I think Toronto's got a 15% tax. So not very good now if you're a foreign investor. But again, if you're an American citizen with a PR permanent residency status in Canada, then you don't have to pay that tax. But
so can you get a refund if you establish permanent residency afterwards, or no? It's like at the time you buy the house, you pay the 20%.
Yeah, there's programs now. I think they kind of tweaked it a little bit where, if you're in the process of applying for something, I think you have like whatever, 12 or 18 months or something. I don't know the exact details of that, but there is ways to get a rebate if you do successfully clear that through that process. But yeah, it's definitely discouraged a lot of, some of that investment for sure.
So I think I also read that you guys have, maybe it's just in some cities, a vacancy tax to discourage foreigners from buying condos and just leaving them vacant. Is that true?
Yeah, we have now like in the city of Vancouver. So like obviously keep in mind the city of Vancouver, like we have different municipalities. But if you're talking about like the main city here, we have what's called like an empty homes tax, where if it's not your primary residence, so if you're not living there as your primary residence, and it's like an investment property, essentially, if you don't rent out that investment property, like they will charge you, I think now it's 2% of your tax 2% of your tax assessment value, right? So if the government says, well, your property is worth $1 million, the tax is 2%. So you'll pay $20,000 annually if you don't actually rent it out for 6 months of the year. So they're basically trying to encourage people that were buying homes for whatever speculative, let's say they're viewed as safety deposit boxes essentially, or maybe they're a pied-à-terre where you use it twice a month, during the summer. They're trying to just discourage or disincentivize that. So if you have an empty home, they basically want you to rent it out at least 6 months of the year. Because we obviously had a really tight rental market and there's huge affordability crisis in Vancouver. So that's kind of some of the extremes that we've seen.
So I know someone in Vancouver, they're a fan of your channel, they're a first-time buyers, professional couple, good income. They're just worried about jumping into the market because they've just seen what the prices have done over the years, but they want to buy their forever home, but they don't want to overpay, they don't want to lose money. What do you tell buyers like that trying to enter the Vancouver market right now? How do you advise them?
I usually just say like you shouldn't be overstretching. So I know like people like, hey, our budget's 1.5 million, and then all of a sudden they're buying a house that reaches 1.8, and it's like, well, so I mean that's number one. I would say number two is like I think right now we have crazy bidding wars in for single family homes. I think like if you can try to avoid those, if you're not in a rush and you can hang out 3 or 4 months, like a lot of this froth will subside. Like we don't have the current pace is unsustainable. So that's another option. And then, yeah, I think the reality is it's like right now, like I think our valuations are a little bit, I mean, they're stretched for sure. And we're in a, we're in a frothy market. So if you are buying today, I think you have to be comfortable knowing that, in 12 months, hypothetically, yeah, you could be down 5 to 10%. Right. So it's a paper loss. It's only a loss if you realize that loss. So it's something to factor in. But if you feel like you can't deal with that emotionally, then maybe you should be better off waiting and trying to time it. It's always difficult to time. Because again, if you had asked me back in, April at the onset of this pandemic, I was like everybody else. I thought for sure we'd see a decline in home prices. And it's been quite the opposite. Obviously, there's been extreme policies that have supported those price increases, but I think it just goes to show everybody's kind of forecasts basically looks, ridiculous now if you go back and look what everybody was saying in April last year. So hard to time, but I do think like, it's prudent to be cautious right now.
So you said there might be a 5 to 10% decline. Of course, nobody knows the future, but I'm curious what you think might possibly cause that.
I think it's just buyer fatigue. I think we've seen it so many. I mean, at least Vancouver's market, I obviously understand it much better than other markets, but in Vancouver it tends to ebb and flow. So, we go through periods of excess. It's always a hot market in Vancouver. Like even when the market's slow, like there's always a buyer just because it's a global city. So it's like we don't have like homes don't sit on the market for 12 months. Like it's just not how it works. Like if it's a slow market in Vancouver, it means like it takes 6 weeks to sell your home. Like that's a slow market. So we don't really have, anyways, that's just kind of how our market works. So it ebbs and flows. When it gets hot, you get into these bidding wars and people tend to overpay. And then when the market slows down, you start to see some price negotiating. So I think people that are getting into these bidding wars are obviously paying premiums. And then when the market starts to slow, you'll see some buyer fatigue. You'll see some more listings start to come on, people trying to capitalize on obviously the crazy price appreciation. So you get supply that'll start to sort of overwhelm the buyer demand, and then you'll see a pullback in prices. That's what we've seen at least here over the last sort of 5-10 years.
Are you thinking this may happen toward the fall in line with seasonality, or do you think it might happen earlier this year?
I think it's probably, if I had to guess, I think probably maybe around the summertime. It's hard to say, but I think like if I just look at the rate of change, for example, so the rate of change of sales or the rate of change of new listings, what I mean by that is you have very easy comparables, right? So for example, we're right now in March. So, March, April, May sales were terrible. They were like the lowest we've ever seen because there was a pandemic last year and the market was basically shut down. So, this March, April, May, you're probably going to see, sales growth of 100, 200%. Like it's going to be insane. And so it's going to look good for headlines and the fear of missing out and look how crazy the market is. And then as you get into June, July, and August, when the market reopened and we had this like housing boom start to take off, it's going to be very difficult to actually try to beat those sales figures. And so I think you'll start to see the media reporting, sales are down 20%, sales are down 30% year over year. And that's just from a rate of change perspective. So I think like overall, I think that the market, is probably due for a slowdown in the next 6 months.
If I'm a buyer in the Vancouver market and I want to buy my forever home, because, whatever, I want to start a family. What I think I hear you saying is like, just keep looking. Yes, it may be crazy. Keep your head. Maybe if you find that perfect thing, great, go for it. Try not to overpay. But, if not, maybe the fall will bring more inventory. But the bottom line is, if you're going to buy for the next 10 years, because it's a long-term purchase, then maybe I really shouldn't have to worry about it so much, whether it's, I'm paying 5 or 10% more. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I think it comes down to like personal decisions, right? It's like, well, why do you want this house? How much cash do you have? Are you liquidating all your life savings just for this one down payment? Like this, there's so many variables that go in, and I hate giving like blanket advice, because I think the number one question that I have, and I'm sure you've had it back in the day too, it's like, hey, should I buy? I'll get a random DM. It's like, hey, should I buy? Is now a good time to buy? I was like, well, I don't know. Who are you, first of all? And how much money do you have? Why do you need to buy? Do you have kids? Do you not have kids? What's your job situation? Are you comfortable in your job? Do you think your job's at risk? Like, there's so many variables that it's just funny, because people are just looking for like a one line answer. Should I buy? Yes or no? It's like, well, no, I don't know. You need to tell me, like, how much property do you have? This is your first product. So there's so many variables that go into it. I don't like giving blanket advice, but like I said, all I can say is that the current market dynamics are, there's some excessive froth, I would say, building up in parts of the market. And so you have to be cautious. I think that, you're paying a premium today for sure. And, if you want to buy still, you just have to know you're paying a premium, and you could very well see a pullback in the next 12 months. And I tend to find that the pullbacks tend to be temporary, but, again, obviously everybody, if you can get a 10% discount, of course, everybody wants a 10% discount. So everybody always tries to time the market. It's just very difficult to do.
Yeah, the answer to that question is always, it depends. And for all the reasons you said, and I appreciate that you're willing to engage in a little speculation. I know none of us have a crystal ball or know what's going to happen, but I appreciate your informed speculation on this topic. So, all right. If I'm a foreigner, still wanting to buy in Vancouver despite the taxes and all that, what kind of property taxes can I expect to pay? What are homeowner insurance rates like? Maintenance costs? I mean, give me an idea of what that's like.
I mean, our annual property taxes are extremely low. So, I mean, I have to look at the numbers, but like on $1 million property, you'd probably be paying, like $4,000 a year, $5,000 a year. So our taxes are extremely low. It's almost like, I would say it's almost backwards, because it basically encourages like offshore investment into the property market, because the taxes are so low. And meanwhile we have really high income taxes. So it's kind of a backwards policy here, but, definitely part of the reason why our property prices are so high is because the annual property taxes are actually incredibly low, especially if you compare it to states like California or large parts of the US. We do have very, very low taxes. Insurance rates are going up more recently, but insurance is still relatively cheap. On a house, you're probably like $200 or $300 a month. In terms of fees, I think that's pretty much it. We have, reasonable fees here. It's quite accommodating to own real estate here. Like, I think the whole sort of economy is set up to support the housing market. Like, I think the one thing that Canada has is basically, I think it's a lot like the Australian market, where housing is such a large component of the economy. And it's gotten so large that governments feel that they're almost inclined to continually support it. And so like the larger that it becomes, the more they feel they have to continuously support it. And then again, the bigger and bigger it comes. And so there's so much net worth tied up into Canadian real estate. So for example, like most Canadians, the sort of thing has been like, oh, you buy your principal residence. Your principal residence is, capital gains exempt. And so everybody just has this view that that's like your retirement savings. Is you buy your house and maybe you buy an investment condo or two, and like that's what they do. Like Canadians don't get excited about the Toronto Stock Exchange market. Like they don't get excited about the TSX. They don't get excited about stocks. Like the US, I know everybody's like, well, you gotta, I think the US is like the stock market's the big thing, right? Like everybody loves the US stock market. And I think that the government in the US explicitly supports the stock market. But in Canada, the government explicitly supports the Canadian housing market. So that's, I think, partially why we have such high prices here as well.
And then as far as utilities go, like electric and gas, do you have a sense of whether they're expensive or cheap or?
Yeah, it's cheap. I mean, our natural gas costs here are like, I think one of the lowest, like globally, as far as I'm aware, at least one of the lowest in North America. So the cost of gas and hydro, I mean, I couldn't give you exact numbers because it depends on like the house, right? But yeah, very, very low costs of energy.
Yeah, retirees always like to know about the, sort of the maintenance costs of a property. So COVID, in the US brought a lot of changes, a lot of people up and moving to someplace else because wherever they were stuck, they didn't like. Wondering if that happened in Canada as well. And if it did, I guess, what are the top opportunities maybe for investors? Like, is there some segment, downtown condos, they all left and now prices have softened, or where do you see the best opportunities?
Yeah, I think we had a similar phenomenon in Vancouver or Canada for that matter. Than what's happening in other parts of the world where everybody, obviously the work from home movement is gaining more and more traction. And so you've seen more people, basically like the suburbs have been the largest beneficiaries of what's happened. And so we've seen the largest run up in prices in the suburbs. Further out, the further away from the city, it seems like the stronger the housing market. So I would argue that, the play today, I mean, it's starting to kind of lose that because people have kind of figured it out now, is that, like the downtown Vancouver condo, those prices came off a little bit and they haven't really moved at all. So they probably dropped 5% and, they haven't moved. Whereas you look at the rest of the property market, particularly in the suburbs, I mean, prices are up 20%. So I would argue that there's a decent arbitrage there, that you have one market that basically hasn't moved in the last 12 months. It has not enjoyed the price appreciation. Meanwhile, the suburbs is up 20%. So I think like when things get back to normal, you might not have the same amount of people going back to the office, but I still think places like downtown, the vibrancy returns, the bars, the nightclubs, the offices open back up. And I think that that segment of the market should do pretty well. So I think that it's a bit of a contrarian play, but I think that that's probably where the opportunity is today.
Do you have a lot of Airbnb rentals in Vancouver downtown? Is that encouraged, discouraged?
It's very heavily discouraged. The city cracks down on it pretty aggressively. A lot of the strata, so these condo buildings, like they're stratas, or I think in the US you guys call them HOAs, but these stratas basically clamp down on Airbnb. So it's very difficult to actually get away with it. So we don't have a plethora of Airbnbs. It's just, it's so regulated again, where the city, because we have such high prices and an affordability problem, the city is really just clamping down on all sorts of these sort of activities.
So if I want to invest in a downtown Vancouver condo, how about long-term rentals? Are those easy to do?
Yeah, we have a very low vacancy rate. Like even during COVID, and like it hasn't been that hard to rent places out. The rents have come off a little bit, maybe 10%, but I think that we've always had like a 1% vacancy rate basically in Vancouver. So it's just, again, global city. So it's a little bit different. There's always someone that's willing to come here and rent, and a lot of immigration and travel. And so, in terms of like a longer term rental, that's really makes the most sense in my opinion. And so yeah, you'll never have a problem renting out a condo downtown. It's just, we've always had a vacancy rate that's hovered around 1% for the last 30 years.
So is there anything else you would tell an American looking to maybe invest in the Canadian real estate market? Anything to set expectations?
I mean, I guess prepare for high prices and foreign buyer taxes. I mean, I don't know. Again, like obviously Vancouver's a great city. Obviously I work here and I get paid, to sell real estate. Personally, I'm more optimistic on US real estate. I think like as a Canadian, I'm more interested in investing in US real estate just because I think the valuations are a lot more in line. It's hard to, from a cash flow, if you're buying an investment property in Vancouver, right, it's hard to make the numbers work from a cash flow perspective. And so, I think it's a nice place if you want to buy a pied a terre and come live here for 6 months of the year. I think it's a fantastic play, but if you're looking to strictly just make money from a cash flow perspective, it's not a very attractive place. So it kind of depends on the investor.
Okay, so personally, I love Vancouver. It's one of my favorite cities in the world. It's so beautiful. I love this pied-à-terre idea. So what if I wanted to like live there 6 months a year, and then would it be possible to rent it out 6 months a year to single person? Is that permitted by
Yeah.
the Stratus?
You would just do, I mean, so there's ways around it too. So for example, you could buy into, it's kind of stupid, but there's the way our tax is structured. If the building, because there's a lot of buildings that like restrict the number of rentals, right? So a lot of the new construction says, you know what, the entire building, if you want, you can rent it out. A lot of these, like some of the older buildings too, like they'll say, well, no, like if there's 50 units in the building, well, only 10 can be allowed to be rented. And so, if they're already at their max, like what are you going to do? You can't rent it out because then the strata says you can't. So if that's the case, then you would actually be exempt from the taxes. So for example, for an American investor, what I would probably say is if you didn't want to rent it out and deal with the headache and you just wanted a pied-à-terre, you'd probably almost be better looking for a building that restricted rentals. And that way you would not be forced to rent it out. So you would simply just use the property as a pied-à-terre. You come and go maybe 2-3 months of the year and lock it up, set it and forget it and not have to worry about it.
And in that scenario, I wouldn't have to pay the tax?
Yeah, you wouldn't pay the tax because if the strata corporation, which is, the strata building that you're buying into, if they have in their bylaws that, rentals are not allowed in the building, like that basically overrides the BC government and the Vancouver government's policy regulations, which say that you have to rent it out for 6 months of the year.
That is a super interesting loophole.
Yeah. So there's always ways around, like, taxes here and there, but there's always ways, but for the most part, it's pretty cut and dry. Like if you know the rules, you know the rules. But as an American investor that wanted a pied-à-terre, that would make target a building that restricts the rentals.
You said something a few minutes ago that I found really fascinating. You said that U.S. real estate investments are a little more interesting to you right now than Canadian ones. Like, what are you looking at? What's interesting and why?
I think we're going through like a massive currency devaluation. And I think that, so you're going through this massive currency devaluation. So I think in that environment, real assets are kind of where you want to have your money. But the only risk to that is that you get, inflation. And so if you get inflation, what you'd want to make sure that your borrowing costs are fixed and locked in. And so I like the fact that the US, you can fix your interest rate, your mortgage rate for 30 years. So no matter what happens, let's say, God forbid, inflation goes to 10% or something, or even 7 or 8%, which I don't think is completely unrealistic. That your fixed costs they're fixed, they're stuck. So what your payment's going to be for the next 30 years. So to me, that's like the biggest risk, obviously in Canada, as everybody's well aware, is that if you have a 5-year mortgage and, again, if central banks aren't able to contain interest rates and we get, significant inflation, and let's say mortgage rates go again from 1.7 to, let's say, even 3.7 or 4.7, like that's going to be very difficult to stomach for a lot of people. So I think that's like the biggest risk for Canadian real estate is just the interest rate environment. So I think like what I like about the US is that I think the valuations, at least in comparison to Canada, are much healthier. And the fact that you can lock in that rate for 30 years, I think it makes it a little bit more of an attractive investment opportunity.
Yeah, that's a huge, huge advantage to be able to do that, because if inflation does get out of control, you've got this cheap money locked in, and it's a great hedge. It's a hard asset. So
yeah. And that mortgage debt that you take on from the government or from the banks there for 30 years is obviously, they're implicitly devaluing the currency. So if you take on a $400,000 mortgage, like the value of that $400,000 in the next 5 to 10 years is going to look like peanuts.
There's a part of me that wonders if people don't subconsciously realize what's happening with, these trillions of dollars that the US, created for the CARES Act to deal with COVID. It's leaking out onto Wall Street. It's leaking out into the economy bit by bit. I mean, I wonder if people just intuitively understand that their dollars are worth less because there's more of them. And maybe that's another reason, besides money being cheap, that they're just keeping the first house and buying a second one.
Well, I think people are starting to figure out that like something's a little bit broken. I think like the big thing for like here in Canada was that I think that people are like, okay, there's literally zero fundamentals and yet prices are up nationally. I think we're up 13% last year, which is a lot. That's a huge price growth. When you look at it and say, well, wage growth was down. We had no population growth, which is kind of what Canada's famous for. We had no foreign investment, which is again what Canada is famous for because there's no travel. So there was no real fundamentals. And so everything that people used to blame high house prices on, like they couldn't. And they're like scratching their head trying to figure out like, wait, who do I point the finger at this time? Like, it's not the foreigner. It's not, immigration. It's not, and we're actually building a lot too. So like, well, it's not necessarily supply. What is it? And I think it's just like people haven't, like, a lot of the mainstream hasn't figured it out, but like it is just basically banks just creating a whole bunch of money and basically just handing it to people in mortgages. And we, like in Canada, we had residential mortgage credit growth was at a 10-year high last year. So basically it says that banks were pumping out money at 10-year highs for mortgages. And so that's really what stoked, a 13% increase, but people don't really understand that. And so, but I think again, that's probably part of like this slow erosion of confidence, I think in money and in society. I think that people feel like they're kind of being hooped a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're right. It brings you back to that game of musical chairs. The music's still playing, but you got to grab that chair while you can, because I don't know where this is going, but something's off.
I don't know. That's what makes the game fun, I suppose, is you kind of just put your chips on the table and see how it works out. But it's going to be interesting for sure in the next few years.
Well, Steve, this has been absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and tell us about Canada. I'm going to put Steve's information down in the description below. So if you're looking for a place in Canada, you can just reach out. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. And then we will cut.
Sweet. Yeah, that was awesome.